I do not normally do videos about the Mavericks. I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan, and this is a message to other Dallas Mavericks fans, and hopefully this gets around because the reason I'm doing this, I'm not planning on making a Mavs channel, anything like that. I'm just talking as a fan. And it seems like everybody is on a ledge ready to jump off. Everybody has given up on the organization. Everybody thinks Nico Harrison has ruined the team. And I'm going to tell you why he has not ruined the team. Now, you may not agree with me, but let me just challenge you. If you're going to make comments, now I don't believe in deleting comments because I believe in free speech. But if you're going to make comments, if you leave an ad hominem attack, I'm going to ignore it. If you just say your opinion is wrong, I'm going to ignore it. But I challenge you to respond to something that I say in this video specifically and tell me why I'm wrong. Now, I'm 47 years old. I saw the entire Dirk era. I really didn't get into the Mavericks until like the mid to late 90s. And honestly, they were terrible in the 90s. But I think in order to explain why I support Nico Harrison and why I don't think we need to feel like the organization is in shambles and all that stuff is because of context. I need to give you context first. And in order to give you context, I need to give you a history lesson. Now, for those of you who are my age or old enough to remember the prime Dirk years, perhaps you remember these things. And if you remember them, uh, hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from with uh, my view on this whole thing. Um, I would honestly, uh, it's easy for people to be in the moment and react emotionally. And it is very true that in the last few months, the team has not been doing well. And I don't think that has as much to do with the trade, if anything, as people might think. So we have had a lot of injuries happen recently, which makes it unfair to really judge how this trade is. And I have some criticisms as well for this trade that everyone's been talking about the last couple of months, and I'll get to that. But in order to hopefully help you understand where I'm coming from as a Mavs fan and as a basketball fan, I learned things along the way. I learned in the Dirk years why was it that we failed in the playoffs from year to year. I do believe that there are teams that are championship level rosters and the way they're coached, but not all championship level teams are necessarily going to win the championship. So I'm not suggesting that only one year out of that whole Dirk era were we championship level. I think there was one or two other years where we were good enough to win it all, but didn't. And there are other years where I feel like we were exposed. We had a weakness that was exposed. So, what I'd like to do first is talk about the Nelson Cuban years, Mark Cuban and Donnie Nelson, and their philosophies of building a team. And we had a lot of success with that, but there was a weakness to it. Generally speaking, the way that they built teams, the kinds of players we drafted and traded for, and and signed as free agents and things. 9 out of 10 of those were offensive minded players that didn't play defense. Oftentimes, we had an unathletic team, one of the least athletic teams in the NBA. Even if we had a really good team, there were times we would get exposed by athletic teams that were just they were inferior but they would, as a basketball team, but they would just expose our weakness. Other times it was because we couldn't play defense, right? So what I want to do is go back and show you some things that I remember. And I don't remember everything, and we're going to do this kind of in real time. Um, so yeah, I'm sharing the screen now. What I would like to do is get to here. Okay, this was 2001, the first year the Mavericks made the playoffs with Dirk. And I don't remember the players that we had at the time. Um, so I just want to look at it. We faced the Jazz. We lost the first two games, and then we came back and won. I think that the Jazz, who were still, they had Malone and Stockton and all that, but they were at the end of their run, and I think they were getting tired as the series went along, and the Mavericks were able to pull away and win the series. And I'm trying to remember who we had on the roster at the time. Let's see if I can get the team stats. Um, that's series stats. Okay. Um, maybe down here. Okay, we had Finley, Nowitzki, Nash, Jawan Howard, Sean Bradley. Those were, I believe, our starters. Nash and Nowitzki were all offense. They were great offensive players, but neither of them played defense. Finley was a little better on defense, but still not a great defender. Jawan Howard is he added like a post offense uh, scoring that Dirk didn't hadn't developed yet at the time. But again, he was not known for his defense. Sean Bradley, I mean, I guess he was known more for defense, but he was pretty soft. He was a soft player, and so I'm trying to see. Eddie Nahara was a good defender off the bench, but he wasn't very athletic. He was just a blue collar workhorse that we had. Um, and so looking at this team, Calvin Booth was a decent backup center, defensive, had some defense. I thought he was maybe a little better than Bradley at one point. Maybe not this year, but he was. But what you notice here is perhaps the most athletic player on the team is Jawan Howard, but he didn't play defense. We had an exciting team. It was fun because the Mavericks were so bad for so long that they it was good to finally uh, see them in the playoffs and actually be fun to watch because they had a great offense. And I just want to say that when we faced the Jazz were not known to be athletic either. They were also an old team, and we were able to overcome them. And then when we played the Spurs, um, let's go back here in the second round. I want to say, was it this one or the next time they played the Spurs that Dirk was hurt? Let's look at is this their series stats? Yeah, yeah, it's their series stats. Now the Spurs, of course, were a championship level team. They had won a championship a couple of years earlier. They still had Duncan and Robinson, um, Terry Porter, and Antonio Daniels, but they weren't an athletic team. I think Malik Rose was a guy that gave us trouble. He was a good defender, long, athletic wing that the Mavericks really didn't have. I want to see, yeah, Dirk played all 5 games in this one, but we just got exposed by a better defensive team, right? And so we just didn't have a playoff caliber team that was built. I mean, not playoff, but a championship caliber team is what I meant. We didn't have a championship caliber team. We had a bunch of shooters, and we had a little bit of threat in the post with Juwan Howard, but excuse me. But we honestly didn't have very good defense, and we weren't very tough. So that was 2001. And I wasn't really expecting us to go all the way. It was just fun that they were in the playoffs after a long time of not being in the playoffs. So obviously that year showed us that we weren't ready. Um, and I think I was already thinking at that time that we needed better defense, we needed a better center, and so that was something to consider. I'm trying to remember who we played the next year. We beat the Timberwolves. We swept the Timberwolves in a three-game or a best out of five, and they had Kevin Garnett. And I remember Dirk. Um, Dirk was amazing, and he outplayed Kevin Garnett. You know, uh, I'm just curious who we had on the team, but I'm going to go to this series instead. Oh, we got run out by the Kings. Interesting. Um, I don't remember us getting beat 4-1 against the Kings, but I think this was the same year the Kings should have beaten the Lakers, but they got screwed by the refs. Um, but just to see, I'm curious who we had on the roster at this point. Um, so we had our big ones: Nowitzki, Finley, Nash, Rafe LaFrance. See, Rafe LaFrance is basically a third-rate version of Dirk. He's an outside shooter. He's a tall, 7-foot guy, maybe 6'11". I don't know how tall he was. Didn't play defense. And I felt that it was a mistake at the time to put that kind of player next to Dirk. That way back in 2002, I believe that what we needed was an athletic defensive center next to Dirk. But we ended up with LaFrance, which I think our defense might have been worse than it had been. Now we still had Bradley um, coming off the bench, Evan Eschmeyer, another soft big that we had on the roster. I always liked Nahara. He was a good, scrappy defender. He just didn't play defense. Now, Adrian Griffin and Greg Buckner, I remember them being solid defenders and they were good wings. They weren't very athletic, they were just good defenders in my memory. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but my memory is that they could both play some defense. But generally speaking, we got Nick Van Exel that year, and he brought some mental toughness that was crucial for the next year that I recall. For some reason, I thought Avery Johnson was here already with Nick Van Exel. Maybe he just didn't play in that series. And I can't remember who else we got in that trade, but yeah, you can see we still had a soft team, unathletic team. We could score a lot, but the Kings were also an offensive team, but I think that they had a little bit more. Like Doug Christie was a huge X factor, long wing. I mean, long arms, pretty athletic, and a great defender. That was something we did not have. And I think Divock was a good all around team player. He could pass, he could, you know, and he had some toughness. And I think he gave us trouble too. I think that Weber and Stojakovic was similar to like Nash and Nowitzki. I mean, Scott Pollard was another guy that was kind of athletic and a good defensive player that I recall that they had. So they had a little bit more. I don't remember Wallace so much, um, but yeah, they had a little bit more athleticism, a couple of you know and that was just a slight difference. And I think they had a little more toughness as well that year, and they beat us in 5 games. So I'm kind of giving you this history because I think it's important to remember, and why I defend Nico has a lot to do with what I've learned over the years. Now, 2003, we started out against Portland, and I remember that series because we started out up 3-1, and then uh, that we lost 2 games in a row. And this team gave us trouble because they had a lot of athleticism. and they started to expose us. And they were also a tough, like street tough kind of a team. Um, they had a mental toughness that the Mavericks lacked, even though I think we were a superior team. Um, Let me see if it shows like where we ranked. Um, Number six, yeah. So the Mavericks were the 3 seed and the Blazers were the 6 seed. So we were definitely a better team. We started out 96-86, then 103-99, and then, oh, we won game three. So we were up 3-0. And then we lost 98-79, 103-99, 125. So we lost three in a row and almost, after a 3-0 lead, almost gave up the series. But I remember that I think at halftime we might have been down in this game, in game seven. And it was Nick Van Exel that had a pep talk to the team and said, F them, we're going to do what we do. He gave a little bit of mental toughness that kind of woke them up enough to finish off the series and win the series. Nick Van Exel, small guy, but I think he brought some mental toughness that they didn't have before. And they were able to get past that series. Without a guy like him, I don't think they would have finished. I think they would have lost, honestly. So who did we have? So Nick Van Exel brought a little bit of mental toughness to the team. Was Naharos starting? No, he wasn't. Um, so Raja Bell, I remember him coming off the bench, was a decent defender. So we had Bell and Griffin as solid defenders. Walt Williams was okay as a defender. Um, but we had a little bit more grit down there. And so yeah, we were able to overcome this really athletic team with Rasheed Wallace, Zach Randolph. These kinds of players gave the Mavericks problems, and they had Scottie Pippen. I forgot about that coming off the bench. I don't know how much he contributed, but and towards the end of his career, it looks like he didn't do a. Let's see. Um, anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, that team gave us problems. I just remember them being mentally tougher, like a street like mentality that kind of that we were able to overcome because of Nick Van Exel's leadership. And then we faced in the second round the Kings, and the team that beat us in five, we beat in seven. I really think that adversity against the Blazers and overcoming that helped us in this series. So we split the series. This was in Sacramento to start. We split the road games, and then they split back against us. So it was a pretty even match if you look, as it went to 7 games. And uh, you know, I think I honestly think that the difference between this year and the year before might have been Nick Van Exel. His mental toughness brought that out of the rest of the players a little bit. And of course, Raja Bell and Adrian Griffin, I think, were also tough, tougher players. And the Kings were not necessarily super athletic. So it was a better matchup for us. Um, and we were able to handle them better. I don't know what the difference is. Maybe they weren't quite, well, they were the 2 seed, so they were still really good. I just think the Mavericks got better, um, obviously. But but we got to the Western Conference Finals, and I believe this was when Dirk got hurt and didn't really play the whole series. Let's see. So yeah, 3 games. Um, yeah, he only played 3 of the 6 games. Um, but again, the Spurs were just at another level. They were known more for defense than the Mavericks. And another reason why I learned that defense is important in the playoffs. And sometimes the hoop gets smaller for outside shots um, as you get to the playoffs. Those outside shots the Mavericks were so good at become a little less, uh, consistent. And so one of the things they had to learn at this time was attacking the basket more. And they were kind of a soft team. And I know that Nate Van Exel brought more toughness, but he was a small guy. He didn't penetrate the basket much. Dirk was getting better at that over the years, but still hadn't developed that so much. Rafe LaFrance was not a guy that would attack the basket. Finley did a little bit. Finley did more than the others, but they just weren't quite to the level of the Spurs, who were known for their defense. And they would make a lot of easy shots and open up the perimeter shots for later. Now, I'm not going to go through every season, but in '04, I know they had a kind of a team of misfits, and I don't think they went very far. They lost to the Kings in the first round. So um, they had Antoine Walker and Antoine Jameson, I believe, that year. And it was just not, the chemistry just wasn't good. Let's see. Oh, they had Marquise Daniels and Josh Howard as rookies. Those were good pickups. They just weren't quite ready yet. But they had Antoine Jameson, who was a decent mid-range shooter, somewhat athletic, but not a defender. And then Antoine Walker was kind of a volume shooter in his own words, and wasn't great for chemistry with Dirk, I don't think at all. But I think they were starting to rebuild a little bit with Daniels and Howard, and those guys brought some length and athleticism and defense and youth, right, to the team. But the chemistry was terrible that year, and they just didn't quite gel. Um, so I'm going through this because it's things that I learned. What was it that was the reason? How did they get exposed when they weren't championship level teams? 2005, they beat the Rockets in seven. And who did the Rockets have? Was that when they had Yao Ming, I believe, and maybe Tracy McGrady? Let's see. Yeah, they had Tracy McGrady, who was a great matchup with Dirk. I mean, both Dirk and McGrady had a great series. McGrady, very athletic. Yao Ming, a good big center. Um, and outside of that, I don't really remember any of these guys. Um, that's minutes per game, points. Yeah, nobody else was really that, you know, much of a threat. Mike James was third in scoring. So as you can see, outside of McGrady and Yao Ming, they didn't have a lot of depth. And the Mavericks had, they had Jason Terry already. They had Jerry Stackhouse, who was an athletic, good offensive player, but not great on defense. I think Terry has some grit. He brought the same toughness that Nick Van Exel had, but I think he was a better scorer and stuff. But he had mental toughness that was very important for the team in years to come. So Howard and Daniels were developing more. Dampier, I think he was the best center the Mavericks had ever had up to that point. Unfortunately, the way that centers played was changing and becoming more athletic. He brought some strength that they could have used in earlier years when they faced somebody like Shaq, who would just push around Bradley and whoever else they had. But Dampier, he could hold his own against Shaq. I'm not saying he could stop Shaq or he was as good as Shaq, but he had the strength to stand up against Shaq. Unfortunately, the league had more players like Dwight Howard and Tyson Chandler, and he just could not jump. and also he was a liability on offense. Like he would get the ball in the post and miss layups. He wasn't that dominant, with the ball in the post. So, but he brought a little bit of girth and strength down there that we hadn't had before. And then here we had Keith Van Horn, another unathletic shooter that was tall. Um, so Devin Harris was here at this point. I think that was his rookie year, and he was a decent backup point guard. Um, but I think Jason Terry was our starting point guard that year, and Steve Nash was gone. So we were kind of rebuilding the team, and Avery Johnson became the head coach and focused more on defense than Don Nelson did. So we were kind of building something up, and we were able to overcome the Rockets. It was a pretty even number 4 versus number 5, and we lost the first 2 games at home, and then we won the next 2 games on the road. um, Actually won 3 in a row, and then the Rockets, and then we won. We finished them off. So that was a good comeback, and I think it was the beginning of the next, you know, of building something, right? And then the second round, we played the Suns, and I kind of remember the Suns being a problem for us athletically speaking. When I mentioned athleticism, that's going to be something that will come up over and over again with the kinds of rosters that the Nelson Cuban era would always build on this team. So they had Steve Nash, who was a great fit for that team. But Stoudemire and Marion gave us problems. They were long, athletic players. Stoudemire was more of an offensive player, but we could not stop him on defense. He was the kind of guy that gave Dampier problems. Sean Marion gave Dirk problems with his defense. Marion's defense was incredible against Dirk. He had the length and the quickness and great defensive skills to make Dirk struggle a bit in that series. So this was another one where athleticism gave us problems. And I want to see how Dirk did because my memory was that he struggled a bit in this series. 26.5 was his field goal percentage down, um, 453. Yeah, I mean, I just remember him struggling. He probably still had his moments, but again, athleticism gave us problems. Now, in 2006 was the year that we had a championship run, and I think that we should have won the championship. We had a championship level team in '06. Avery Johnson was focusing on defense, which is very important. Um, as we come out and we sweep the Grizzlies, I'm trying to remember who the Grizzlies had. Um, they might have had Zach Randolph already at the time. Let's see. Um, well, they had an older Eddie Jones. Pau Gasol was there, but he's not an athletic guy. Dirk is better than him. Um, yeah, I guess they didn't have Zach Randolph yet, but they were really no problem for us. You know, we ran them out of the gym, and uh, and then we beat the Spurs in 7, and now we're up to that kind of level. We had some experience in the playoffs. We have, you know, Avery Johnson coaching toughness and defense, and Josh Howard and Marquise Daniels were coming into their own and starting to contribute as solid. You know, they could score a little bit. Daniels didn't do that much here, but I kind of remember, yeah, Howard 16 points a game in this series. Um, so those 2 guys brought some defense, and they could do a little. And John Ajop, I think, had some athleticism. He did pretty good as a backup center, or actually, he was the starter, I guess. Yeah, I guess Jop became the starter. He had the athleticism, and that Dampier did not have at the time. Um, but I think it had something to do with coaching. When I look at this roster, it's still not that athletic. It's not very athletic. We don't have but maybe a couple of really good defenders, but I think that when a coach coaches defense, it helps. Avery Johnson did that, and so did Rick Carlisle, and I think Jason Kidd does too. But it doesn't mean that the Nelson Cuban roster building was necessarily the reason for that. And then we faced the Suns. Now I remember the Suns had injuries. That athleticism that hurt us the year before. Um, let's see. Yeah, Marion played all 6 games. It was Stoudemire was out, so he didn't even play a single game. Stoudemire had that athleticism on offense that we couldn't stop, and he didn't play in this series. So I think that made a huge difference. And in the finals series, um, despite I think the refs screwed us in this series. I also think the Mavericks contributed. They went up 2-0 in this series, and it looked like we played some good defense. But I think what happened was Dwayne Wade started attacking the basket and drawing fouls. Some of them were real fouls, but he was attacking the basket. And my memory was the Mavericks were not. So that was another thing I learned is when you aren't hitting shots on the outside, you can compensate for that by attacking the basket. And Howard and Daniels were 2 guys that were capable of doing that. Finley was capable of doing that. But for some reason, our team just stopped attacking the basket. Dirk was still not consistent at doing that at this point. But I think we were just as good, if not as good as the Heat, as if not better than the Heat. We just fell apart in that series. And so now '07 was a crazy year because we won 67 games and then lost in the first round. um, Actually, what I need to do is go to here. Oops. Um, I need to go back to come on. Okay. I need to go back to here and then go to '07. Okay. So this was the year that we lost in the first round. Now, what was it that exposed the team against the Warriors? We were the 1 seed. We won 67 games that year. The Warriors were the 8 seed. They were a red hot team going into the playoffs, and they had Don Nelson as their coach. The Mavericks were a superior team, but why did we struggle against them? Down 0-1, we split the series 1-1, and then we got crushed down 2-1, lost 3-1. We won barely 4-1, and then got crushed. My memory of this game was that the athleticism of the Warriors was way too much for this team to handle. Baron Davis, Steven Jackson, Jason Richardson, probably the least athletic of those. Matt Barnes was this gritty, uh, somewhat undersized. I don't think he was a 4 or a 5. I don't remember, but he gave us problems. Matt Barnes was aggressive, one of those, you know, aggressive defensive kind of players. Monte Ellis, just a team of athleticism, and they were more known for their offense, but their athleticism exposed our weakness. So that was another series that I think we got exposed by the lack of athleticism. Um, Now, the next few years, we were either one and done. We might have won a series. Let's see. The next year, we lost to the Hornets. Okay, now I want to bring this up. Another team that was more athletic than we were. I can't remember what seedings these teams were, but Mavs were 7. Okay, the Hornets were the better team, but they had Tyson Chandler at center. The Hornets did, and he was just too athletic for our Mavs team to stop. And I'm trying to remember who else they had. Chris Paul, David West, Peja, Tyson Chandler. Tyson Chandler was the main guy I remember giving us problems with his defense and alley-oop dunks and stuff. And his name will come into play again later, but lost in the first round. I think after that loss to the Warriors as a when the Mavs were the 1 seed and lost in the first round, the Mavericks lost a lot of confidence after that. So 2008 first round exit. 2009 we beat the Spurs in 5. Let me see, where were we ranked? Um, we were 6th, the Spurs were 3rd, and we upset them, right? Now, Spurs, again, not the most athletic team, but I'm trying to remember who was on the roster just to check real quick. We had, oh, here we go. Yeah, Josh Howard was still really good, 18 points a game, good athletic long wing that could play defense. Jason Terry always brought toughness, mental toughness to the team. And then we had Jason Kidd at this point, but we were kind of developing chemistry there. Dampier was still there. Brandon Bass was an athletic, big, power forward type, but he didn't play defense. Antoine Wright was a solid defender that year. And I don't remember who else we had. Matt Carroll was the kind of guy that Nelson liked, just an unathletic shooter that didn't do anything else. But yeah, we upset the Spurs that year. And I'm trying to remember if we had Rick Carlisle at that point or not. Avery Johnson, I think, might have been fired the previous year. 2010, I think we lost in the first round again. And at this point, so the Mavericks lost to the Spurs. Let's see what we were ranked this time. So the Mavericks were the better team during the season, but lost to the Spurs. So it was at this point they were called the one and done boys. Now, why am I going through all this? Because it's applicable to where we're going, the context of why I'm defending Nico. We were, let's see, yeah, we were the better team during the season and then lost. Now, the Mavs and Spurs seem to always be pretty well balanced or a pretty good matchup because the Spurs were never that athletic. Was this the year they had? I'm wondering if they had what's his name? Leonard. No, they didn't have Leonard yet, but they had Manu Ginobili, who's a good all-around player. I just think the Mavericks. And who did we have? We had Caron Butler at that time. Again, more of an offensive player, similar to Michael Finley, I guess. Sean Marion. So we did have Sean Marion at the time. And I think we were building something for the next year. We didn't have Tyson Chandler yet, but I do remember when we got Sean Marion being kind of excited about that because of what he did against us a few years earlier, right? An athletic, defensive, long wing who can score a little bit. And we got him. Now, my only question is, could he do what he did when he was younger? And I don't know if he did this year, but Brendan Haywood brought, I think he was a pretty good center for us before we got Tyson Chandler. He was better than Dampier and might have been the best center the Mavericks had ever had up to that point, believe it or not. So, yeah, Deshaun Stevenson, he was here, but he wasn't that much involved yet. But he was a good defensive wing and kind of athletic. He didn't score much, but he could shoot threes. He was a good 3-and-D player. at that time. So that brings us to 2011, the championship run. And I probably won't go past that, and I'll just skip over to the Luka years after this because the problem with the team after this, well, I'll get to that. This Spurs series, you could tell during the series that they weren't quite confident yet. Things had not quite clicked yet, but we were able to pull away and win. Actually, I remember us making a comeback uh, to win in Game 6, I believe. But you know, some the Mavericks had a nickname at this point called the One and Done Boys. The last few years didn't do much, and even this series didn't do much. One and done meaning they might win the first series, but they're going to lose the next one if they don't, or if they do. And that's kind of there was nothing again about this. I mean, they had Brandon Roy. There was nothing about them that instilled confidence that we would go any further. But then we beat the Lakers in 4 games, and the Lakers still had now Sean Marion, great defensive player, long, athletic wing. Tyson Chandler, same thing, athletic center, great defensive player, could do alley oops. He actually could catch the ball in the post and dunk it, unlike Dampier and Hayward. So he was the best center the Mavs had ever had up to that point. The perfect guy to go next to Dirk, right? You can win with a guy like Dirk. Now, Dirk is a liability on defense, was, but you got to have the right pieces around him. And so guys like Marion and Chandler and Stevenson really helped. And then we had depth at the center position with Haywood, and Jan Mahimni. Um, but I think the team defense was better than its parts. I mean, we had a couple of really good defenders, but the team defense was fantastic. And Dirk in this playoff run was the most clutch that he ever was. I mean, he had a mental toughness. He was determined. He would take it to the basket. He was super clutch in this whole thing, right? And it was a fairly old team. You look at the ages 32, 33, 33, you know, a lot of 30 something. So they couldn't really keep it all together. Now, Chandler, they let go. I think they should have re signed him, but he was a guy that had an injury history, and it was kind of a risk. And when you had Haywood and Mahimi on the bench, maybe you could take that money and spend it elsewhere. But I think the main issue with the team for the rest of Dirk's career was that that first of all, Cuban and Donnie Nelson did not take the draft seriously at all, and they were, you know, so they traded a lot of draft picks away. They were always trying to get the superstar on the team rather than building it the right way. And that was another thing that frustrated me about how they built the team. Um, Now, I want to start with the 2019 Mavs roster because I want to see what their team looked like at this point when Luka came in. I think this was Luka's rookie year. Yeah, there he was. And he came in and was great right away. Um, but let's look at it. I mean, JJ Barea was here, undersized guard. I liked him. He was a gritty player. I don't remember this guy. Was that the guy we drafted? Um, Brunson was a late bloomer in his rookie contract and had a few good games in the playoffs and then got signed somewhere else. But I honestly, most Mavs fans think we should have re-signed him and given him a max contract or something, or matched what the Knicks paid him. But I thought that was risky because he only had a couple of really good games. He had a solid second half of the season but he ended up fulfilling, being is better than I thought, you know, he showed for that time. Looking at this team now, Dorian Finney-Smith developed to a really good long defender, 3-and-D guy. Well, he wasn't that athletic, but he was long. He could shoot some threes and he could play defense. So I really liked him. Tim Hardaway Jr. is one of those stereotypical Donnie Nelson guys that was a shooter and not athletic and didn't play defense. And his shooting was streaky. Um, I don't really remember what he did with us. Now, Maxi Kleba developed into a decent 3-and-D guy, but again, not very athletic. Marjanovic, not athletic at all, but he was tall and he was fun to have around. Porzingis, he was injured a lot, but he was a great player, but I don't know if he was probably better defensively than Sean Bradley, but again, not yeah, he had some athleticism, but he was hurt a lot too. He also, I mean, at his height, I don't know. Dwight Powell was a gritty player, and Delon Wright I kind of remember as a decent defender as well. But again, not a very good roster at this point. Um, and so as we look at what they've developed, um, yeah, Tyler Bay was a bust in the draft. We still had Brunson. Cauley Stein was an athletic big, but he wasn't very good. Couldn't play. So um, I like Josh Green. He was a decent defender, but he never really developed into a good basketball player. Um, at least while he was here. I don't know what he's done since then. Again, a bunch of bust draft picks. Hinton, Bay, never did anything here. Um, yeah. So again, Dirk was gone. We don't have Tyler Terry, another guy that we drafted that didn't pan out. So not a very good roster, but they're building something, right? And then we had a pretty good season this year. Let's see who we had. Another stereotypical Nelson guy, Davis Bertans, the worst contract, one of the worst contracts I ever remember. No athleticism, a streaky shooter, did nothing else, no defense. Yeah, um, I could not stand that. It's like, how many of those kind of guys are we going to sign? I don't remember how Moses Brown did here. Seems like he was decent off the bench. Um, Reggie Bullock, good defender. That was a good piece. And I don't remember Marquise Chris. I don't really remember. Spencer Dinwiddie became a good backup point guard for us. And then, of course, we had Luka. So Dorian Finney-Smith, and Reggie Bullock gave us a little, some of that defense. Um, Man, we had a lot of players that year. I wonder if we had a lot of injuries and stuff. Um, so yeah, Porzingis. I remember when he played, he was good, but he was hurt a lot when he was here. So, um, yeah, I wonder how far we got in the playoffs that year. Does it say here? One NBA Western Conference first round, one NBA Conference semifinal. So we got to the NBA to the Western Conference Finals against Golden State. So that was the team that beat us. Wow, I don't remember this really. Um, just out of curiosity, I'm going to click on this. Um, so they still had, Curry, Thompson, Draymond Green, um, you know, and they beat us in five. So we just weren't quite ready. I wonder if we had any injuries in that series. Um, Yeah, Doncic did his thing. Brunson was pretty solid in that series. And but you look at this team, there's not a lot of athleticism. We have a few players on the roster that are just shooters, like Bertans. Um, but it's not, the lack of athleticism is just crazy, to me. And we had a couple of, did we start? Yeah, we had Bullock and Finney Smith, which I think is why we got to the conference finals. And Dwight Powell was he's a very gritty, blue collar kind of player, you know. Reminds me of Nahara in that way, but he just doesn't have the athleticism to do much for your team, right? Kleba was a good 3 and D power forward center. But you just look at this roster, and we had a great Luka Doncic. We had a couple of good defenders. We got to the Western Conference Finals, but I just think it's not outside, and I think Brunson's late blooming as a um, as a guard helped as well as a second ball handler to Doncic. The next year we won 38 games, so we went down again. Um, and again, a lot of players on the roster in and out. But I kind of remember a lot of this early part of Doncic's career that we had very little depth. Again, Bullock and Finney Smith are there, but not a lot of depth on this team. Jaden Hardy was a rookie, but he was not that impactful at that point. Now we had Kyrie Irving. I don't remember him that early on the team. I don't remember what he did that year, but he was on our roster. Um, Interesting. I didn't know it was that early. Christian Wood, I actually liked, but uh, Rick Carlisle didn't like him. I think because he didn't play defense. That's my guess. But I liked him because he was athletic. JaVale McGee, terrible player, or at least when he was here. He used to be a decent role player, but he didn't do much here. And so, who was our centers at the time? JaVale McGee and Dwight Powell and Christian Wood. See, very weak, very, very, very weak. And I think we might have started Kleba a lot at center, but um, or maybe Powell and Kleba were starting. That's why we were so bad that year. But again, roster building. We went back to 50 wins. Who did we have now? Let's see. We had anybody that sticks out. Oops. We have anybody that sticks out here. Oh, Daniel Gafford. We had him. I'm trying to remember if Nico was here at this point. Yeah, Nico Harrison. Was he here the year before? Yeah. So Nico got here 21, 22. So this is the team Nico inherited. Okay. They won 42 games and went 42 and 30. And Cauley Stein had some athleticism, but not a great basketball player. You look at this team, and this is what he inherited, right? And contracts like Bertans, I think, was on here, right? Was he already here? Hmm. Okay. Well, Bertans, I thought was here, but I guess he wasn't here yet. Um, but we had Porzingis under Boban. I mean, we just had a poorly built roster at the time. Um, so we go on to so Nico Harrison is building this thing, and some of my earliest memories. So what I want to do is look at these trades. Mavs trade for Gafford. I can't remember who we had. Oops. Yeah. Uh, We traded Rashawn Holmes and got Daniel Gafford for Rashawn Holmes. Great, you know, this was one of Nico's first big trades. What about for PJ Washington? Dallas traded for PJ Washington from the Charlotte Hornets in exchange for Grant Williams, Seth Curry, who was just a shooter, right? Another 3-point shooter. Um, I can't remember what Grant Williams did here, but we got PJ Washington, who's a great athletic defender, and he's starting to show that he can do some stuff on offense too. Um, let's see. And then we made a trade with Oklahoma City to acquire the draft rights to Derek Lively, which I think has been, he's been hurt recently, but he's been a great pickup. Um, and then we got rid of like Hardaway Jr. Who did we get back? We got back Quentin Grimes, who was here for a few years. I don't remember him doing much here, but we traded him away and he's been playing well. And people want to say, see, Nico sucks. Well, I don't remember him being that great when he was here. Um, and then Bertans, um, Mavericks are trading number 10 and Davis Bertans of the Thunder. Okay, what did we get back for that? Oh, and that's where we got Derek Lively. See, we got rid of what year was that? 23. Nico Harrison got rid of Bertans and got Lively back in the draft. So things like that make me like um, Nico Harrison. Now, if I look at the roster now that we have, Mavs roster, I want to look at the team that we have on the roster, okay? Since the trade that everybody's been talking about and what we're getting into, what we have is a team full of, you know, Najee Marshall, really good defender, athletic, long wing. PJ Washington, really athletic, power forward, long. He can play multiple positions as well. And he's starting to show that he can score a bit, right? Daniel Gafford, um, a good defensive center he can do the alley oops. He's not a liability so much on offense. But you see this team that is being built here now. I think Prosper has shown some flashes before he got hurt. Lively, I've talked about. Brandon Williams, well, that's kind of an accident. We'll see if we keep him, but um, but you see the kind of and Anthony Davis. If this team was healthy, we would have Kyrie Irving, we would have Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, PJ Washington, Gafford, Lively. I really think when I thought about this trade, okay, just looking at the roster that we have a lot of athleticism, we have a lot of good defenders, and that's what I'm excited about. Just about based on the whole context of everything I just talked about. I look at the roster and I think this team, if healthy, could win a championship. Now, people are going to say, well, Davis, the guy that we got, is injury prone. Now, I'm going to talk about Luka for a second before I move forward. And I recall in the last few years, I remember that the local media and the fans, the local media would talk about how that Rick Carlisle was not happy with Luka, that Nico was not happy, that the team wasn't always happy with Luka for certain reasons. There was a list of reasons. Number one, his conditioning coming into seasons. He's always overweight, and fans talked about this on Mavs talk shows, you know, and and they just and he didn't play defense. He has nagging injuries that he plays through a lot, but he does get hurt a lot, and he's only 25. And he's hard to play with. His style is difficult for other players to play with. And he has an attitude sometimes. He yells at the refs too much. And I've heard local media, Mavs fan media, complain about that with Luka over the last several years. So from that perspective, Nico has probably been trying to work on him over the last few years, and maybe we don't know what's been happening behind the scenes. Maybe he has been talking to him. Maybe Rick Carlisle and now Jason Kidd has been trying to work with him, and he's not listening. He came into this season way overweight again and had a lot of injuries during the first half of this, or missed a lot of games in the first half of this season. And he has a contract coming up, and he will probably demand a max deal. And Nico is probably thinking this is a risk. Now, I know a lot of fans think that's ridiculous. He's the best, one of the best players in the NBA, blah, blah, blah. But remember, everything that I just talked about for the previous 20 years of the Mavericks and what I've learned and what we were exposed with over those years, lack of athleticism, defense, lack of defense in many seasons, um, and those kinds of things. And if you add conditioning to that, and a lot of people say he's only 25, his best years are to come. Well, if he's getting injured a lot in his first 5, 6, 7 years, that will only get worse unless he starts conditioning. And perhaps this trade will motivate him, which I hope it does, and I wish him the best. I'm not anti-Luka, but you take everything into consideration. If Nico had maxed out Luka Doncic, we could have a similar situation to Dak Prescott. Now, Dak Prescott isn't one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks like Luka is one of the top players, but who knows? Who knows what would happen? But I think Nico felt like he's trying to build something here, and his philosophy is different than the philosophy of Nelson and Cuban. Nico's trying to build a team full of athleticism and defense, players that can do both, rather than a bunch of guys that could shoot and are soft on defense and unathletic. I mean, like I said, there were some exceptions over the years, which were the years that we did the best. Uh, but Nico's emphasizing these things, and because Luka is a liability on defense. I mean, there are moments when he does something amazing on defense, but for the most part, he's a liability on defense. He's his attitude and those other things. When the trade happened, now, first of all, I'm going to give you my criticism of the trade because I do, I'm not just an apologist for Nico or anything like that. When Nico said that he secretly worked with one team, and that team was the Lakers, to make a deal, that was a mistake. Last summer, he should have confronted Luka and said, look, we need these things before we give you the next contract. We need you to be in condition coming into the season. We need you to change your attitude. We need you to work on defense, those kinds of things. Now, I don't know. Maybe he did tell him those things, but I would have done that to him and said, look, if these things aren't changing, we're going to trade you, and be upfront and direct with him. I mean, I think he deserves that respect. And the fans would know. I bet that would come out. But what Nico should have done, is contacted every team in the NBA and see what we would get the most back for. That is probably the biggest mistake that Nico made in this trade. Now, the trade is done. When I said we can't reverse that, that's what it is. I thought, okay, let's look at it from the perspective of what do we have now? Let's move forward. Anthony Davis, Offensively, his numbers were very similar, slightly less, but across the board, he's a good all-around offensive player. He's not much worse than Doncic. Defensively, he's much better, right? Now, people point out his injury issues, and I just point out, well, Doncic does too. Now, Doncic has played more games consistently season to season, but Doncic is 25. Is that going to get worse? The injury issues if he doesn't condition. I think Davis is in pretty good condition. He looks like a well-conditioned player, but he's had injury issues. So uh, when I look at the roster, if this roster right now was completely healthy, and this is based on my whole experience as a fan for 20 plus years, I believe we have a championship caliber roster on the team right now. I think it was possible we had it before the trade too, but we were having nagging injuries throughout the first half of the season. We come to the second half of the season after the trade, and immediately everything falls apart. Now, the emotions of fans who were against the trade blame everything that's been happening on Nico and this trade. And they think the franchise is cursed. We're going to be bad for 5+ years and all this stuff. The reason I don't have that attitude is because 8 of these injuries that happened had nothing to do with the trade. These were players we already had. Just 2 years ago, we missed the playoffs with Luka, you know? So Nico's been building something here. And when I thought about it, and we saw the game against the Rockets earlier when in Davis's first game here, where he dominated. I think he went all out to try to prove a point, but he came back too quickly, I think, and was vulnerable, and he got hurt again, unfortunately. But you look at a period of time where all our bigs were out, Gafford, Lively, Davis, and PJ Washington. So that's supposed to be like a big strength of this team, and all 4 of them were gone. Maybe a couple of them were in and out during that stretch. We had other players hurt, but then we got attacked at the point guard position. Kyrie Irving went down, and then Klay Thompson went down. Now, I think with Kyrie Irving out for the rest of the year, I think that pretty much takes our chances away for this season. And, Exum came back. He's back now. And it's a long shot, but I'm curious to see if they can click and get things going for the playoffs this year. But I'm not predicting that they will. They may not even win a play-in game. But with Kyrie's injury, I think that's pretty much they got their bigs are coming back now, and Exum is back, but they have no team chemistry right now because they've been in and out. A lot of players have been missing games. They've been trying to do load management a lot with these players, just trying to stay healthy enough to get to the playoffs. They haven't really played all in uh, for a while now. And these players haven't played together that much. So I really don't think they're going to go very far this year. But I do not blame that on Nico Harrison. I know emotionally people want to do that because they hated the trade. But if there was if these injuries did not occur, I think we would be in much better shape. And I think we would be a championship caliber team right now. But everything fell apart like injury. I've never seen a team this injured before. And next year, we're if Kyrie stays, because there's a chance he could leave, but I think he would be foolish to leave because he's coming off an injury, and I don't know if he'll get as much money as he could if he just stayed another year. If we can get everything going and be healthy going into the playoffs. And people are going to say, well, that's a big if, you have all these injury prone players. Well, in 2011, we had injury prone players as well. Sean Marion and Tyson Chandler had a lot of injury seasons before that, but they were able to stay healthy that year and win a championship, right? So I've got to take what we have, and I also got to trust that the same guy that traded Bertans and got Gafford back, or no, got Lively for it, we were able to get Gafford for basically like Rashawn Holmes. We got PJ Washington for I can't remember who now, but he was making these trades and made our roster better. If you recall, just a few years ago, we had a lot of trash around Luka. I mean, Finney Smith and Bullock were key parts to that, but we didn't have much depth. We had Powell starting at center and Kleba. Um, it was pretty good. But my point is, um, I think that Nico has been doing a good job, and we need to trust the process. If Kyrie does not resign here, I think Nico will make something happen, and we'll get another point guard here, and maybe two other point guards. We'll see. We might make a trade to get a draft pick back, like we did when we traded to get the pick to get Lively. So we don't know what Nico will do, but I've seen him do enough to where I don't think that the franchise is destroyed. I like the team that we have on the roster, if healthy, right? So I'm looking at it from the perspective of I like the philosophy of Nico Harrison, athleticism and defense, and more all around, well rounded players. It's a different philosophy than Nelson Cuban had, where athleticism was never a priority, defense was rarely a priority, and we got exposed for that for so long. So, what I really believe, and I'm going to say this boldly, if this team that we have now is healthy next year, going into the playoffs. I think that we have a Detroit Pistons type team from 2004. If you recall, that was a team that upset the Lakers. And I was one of the few guys that picked the Pistons to win that series. The Lakers were, a two-time, three-time. No, well, they didn't win the year before, but they were a great team, right? Everybody picked them to win. They had not only Kobe and Shaq, but they had Karl Malone and Gary Payton on that team. And I don't remember how many games they won that year, but everybody thought this is going to be a sweep or 5 game series. The Pistons, on the other hand, didn't have any dominant scorers, but they had a bunch of really good athletic defensive players. And they beat the Lakers, right? So when I look at this roster, I think the 2004 Detroit Pistons. Um, and we will see. But if this video does anything, I hope that Mavs fans are not going to jump off the ledge. I've seen a lot of comments on other videos where Mavs fans say, "I'm done with the Mavericks." I'm now a Lakers fan or something like that. Um, I think they're acting emotionally, and a lot of it has to do with the fact we've been losing a lot lately. And again, the injuries make it impossible to see what this roster is right now. So, yeah, again, make a comment. If you have any comments, please respond to something I said in this video and tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. And again, the future of this team is not necessarily in the long run about Davis and uh, Irving. Those are the old guys, right? We have a good core of young players. One that I didn't even mention yet, and that was part of the trade with Max Christie. I know he's been struggling lately, but with the chemistry and players in and out, it's hard for him to. He was showing he was really good when Irving was there, right? So we have Max Christie, we have Prosper, who was showing that he could do some stuff before he got hurt. Lively, Gafford, Washington, they're all entering their prime. Now, I don't know if we'll be able to keep all those guys, but I see a core of the roster that is still fairly young. Jaden Hardy hasn't really. I, I like him when he plays, but I don't think Jason Kidd trusts him very much. So, um, anyway, those are my thoughts. And I really wanted to make this video because nobody else is talking like this. 99% of fans I see on commentaries are on a ledge, ready to jump off. And they want Nico fired, as you could see in that Lakers game the other day when the fans were chanting, "Fire Nico." That game made me so, I could not even watch it. And I don't even have a problem with Luka. I don't have a problem with the Lakers. I just have a problem with the way that the local media is handling this and putting all the emphasis on this trade and how big of a mistake it was and all this stuff. I look at the philosophy of Nico Harrison and I trust the process. I'm also going to give an example. I meant to do this earlier. Uh, the movie Idiocracy. If you've ever seen that movie, it's a Mike Judge movie, same guy that did King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead and Office Space. Well, in Idiocracy, everybody in the future is dumber. And a guy, an average Joe from the present time, is in carbon freezing and wakes up hundreds of years later. And they find out he's the smartest man on earth in the future because everybody else is so dumb. Well, the crops are not growing. So the president calls him and says, "We need you to solve this problem." And the problem is that Brando, which was kind of like Gatorade in the movie, owned everything. They bought everything, and so they probably controlled the media. They controlled uh, what people thought, and the stock market was all owned by Brando. They were using that to feed the crops, and he really didn't. He was not a botanist. Luke Wilson's character was not a botanist. He was like, "I don't know if I can figure this out." But he went out there, and when the sprinklers came on and it was spraying out Brando, he was like, um, "I think I know what the problem is. Maybe you should put water on the crops." And they all laughed at him. And so they did it because he's the smartest guy in the world. And it took time. Sometimes, if you do the right thing to fix a problem, you're going to have some bad things happen in the short term, right? So the crops were not growing right away. And the stock market crashed because everything was owned by Brando. Now they weren't using Brando to water the crops. So the media, which was probably owned by Brando, was, or was it Brando? I don't remember, but they were probably telling everybody what a mistake this was, right? And telling everybody this is the dumbest thing, to put water from the toilet on the plants. Like that's not going to work because Brando, the company that owned everything, was probably feeding that to the media, and the people were reacting to this as well, thinking it was the dumbest idea ever. Well, it took some time, but the crop started growing, and then people started to believe him. You know, I say that because I think that Nico Harrison is building something, and he has a philosophy that he is pushing this team toward. If he continues to do this, I really like what he's doing, and I think he's going to keep bringing in those kind of players. The players that we lacked for so long in the Dirk era, with a few exceptions, right? So, in the short term, we have had other issues. 9 players getting hurt at once, players in and out of the roster, load management here going into the playoffs. And we're probably not going to do much in the playoffs. Even if we won the 2 play-in games, we're going to have to play Oklahoma City. We're not going to beat them. So I look at this from the perspective of uh, next year. is my hope. But I also look at the long term and I trust the process of Nico Harrison. All right. So tell me what you think in this comments section. Am I a lone wolf in this matter? Like, uh, I'm telling you what I really, really believe in my heart from many years of being a fan. And I played basketball as well in high school. So this is just me giving you my opinion. And I want to see if there's people out there that agree with me. All right. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.